Hey, greetings, friends at the well, and anyone watching this. This is part of a series that we've been doing over these last couple of months called The Dose of Hope. And I thought for today, for so many reasons, I just wanted to speak into and just address the things that we have been watching, the events that have been unfolding over the last several days in the United States, but that has evoked a response around the world. With the death, the killing of George Floyd, and then the protests that have come since then, the innumerable responses in terms of physical protests, social media, and all of that. And the reason we're talking about it today is because, I guess, a number of reasons. One is just out of my own heart, feelings of hopelessness and despair come up when I see just the tragedy, and my heart just breaks, and there's sadness, there's anger, there's all of that. And, there is even this feeling, even as I've been watching some of the responses by people, I'm so glad people are speaking out against racism and against this, but you realize both in what people are saying and even in what people are doing, there feels like an emptiness to it as well. Like in many ways, it feels like not platitudes or whatever, when people are saying, oh, we just need to educate, we just need to whatever. And I'm like, yeah, we've known this, and we have been educating and we have been protesting, and why isn't anything changing? And so there's hopelessness around that, around the solution. But yet I just know, even just as a community, we've been reading through the Gospel of Luke and just finishing up this and knowing for certain that Jesus himself not only would be speaking to this or involved in this, but his whole life and ministry, he was up to his neck in dealing with the barriers and the issues of racism, or race, gender, socioeconomic disparity, power dynamics, power imbalances involved in religion and politics. And it was all part of his world, and it's right throughout his teaching and all throughout his interactions. And so absolutely we know this is something Jesus would be speaking into. I asked Dave Au, our Vaughan site pastor, to join me just because I don't like doing this alone all the time. And but also Dave, when you and I were talking about this yesterday, you mentioned your own experience as someone born and raised for a part of your life in Hong Kong, and then just what that country and your community of people have been going through even recently, sort of obviously prior to this, but over the last year and a half. So maybe just talk to that a little bit and what you've observed in your own experience of it as you've been interacting with it, thinking about it, talking with various people who are also from Hong Kong, who live there and who live here.
Yeah. If you've been following, right, for the past couple of years, Hong Kong has been on protest. There's been a lot of civilians just out on the streets, basically not agreeing with what the government was doing. And there has been some form of police brutality. So when the whole incident of George Floyd came up, what I'm seeing is, some friends are kind of tying both of these incidents together. And there seems to be a kind of a mistrust with authority these days. And what I've seen is these things are so divisive, and that usually there are a couple of reactions, and I'm part of that camp where it's just too much information online and every day, and so begin to tune out. And some of these images are so violent that I don't actually want to see it. It actually terrifies me to click play and listen to the sound, and it haunts me, right? So I'm kind of part of that camp where, okay, just really, really just, watch what I watch online. But there's also another camp that constantly consumes a lot of information, from the media outlets, from videos that are just, being sent out with, from various kinds of network. And yes, I understand that, there is always that central incident like George Floyd, right? Knee on the neck type. That's real. It actually happened, right? But and then there's all kinds of other videos and articles and commentary around the incidents that are just not so helpful, and to a point where people don't really know what's real and what's not real. So, and I've been in conversations where, about the Hong Kong incident, it's just, with friends and kind of sitting over lunch, before the lockdown, where the whole conversation is just about that, like we were supposed to come out together, right? And all of a sudden, the topic just takes a hold of the entire group, and it became, heated. I've heard, from friends, WhatsApp chat group, leaving family WhatsApp chat group because of these political differences. And it just breaks my heart that way, because we went from one extreme to the other. 10, 15 years ago, Hong Kong people of Hong Kong was considered like apolitical. They don't really care. But now it's like to the other extreme. So my question is, how do we respond in a situation like this that's so divisive?
Yeah, and I think what even complicates the matter is, when you have pictures of politicians waving Bibles, or it plays into actually a lot of the beliefs that people have, some of which are substantiated in some way, that the church is sort of complicit in all of this. That is, the church is racially divided, socioeconomically divided, that the church is somehow more of a political institution and instrument, and is therefore embroiled in this as well. And I think what is so stunning to me is that when you look at the life of Jesus, and Jesus coming to show us who God is, we see, both this, like Jesus addressing the fact that how inherently valuable is every human life is, male, female, old and young, across every race, gender, socioeconomic, situation, those with power, those without power, those wealthy, those in abject poverty. Jesus showed and demonstrated the incredible value that each person has. And I think as the church, we need to say, yes, like, and when there are certain sections and races and segments of society that are not, we say, yes, they are inherently valued. This is a problem for this people group. And whether that's Black people who are at risk because of their skin color in certain parts of the world, or in countries near, even if we say, oh, well, this is not in our country, I think that's not really the point. This is true around the world, of different races in different times, whether that's women, and not just women, but women who are trafficked, or women of a certain age or from a certain country, as we've been involved in as a church. We say, no, this matters. But that Jesus also was addressing the brokenness in each of us, that all of this stuff brings up the brokenness that's in all of us, that when you see hate, you can respond in hate, that when you see violence, you can respond in violence, that when do you know what I mean? And so when brokenness hurts you, you can respond out of your own brokenness. We're all like that. And Jesus both showing the inherent value and dignity of each person, and yet showing and addressing the brokenness in each of us. One of the things I think is incredible too, is you realize, Dave, like one of the reasons Jesus got killed is because of how aggressive he was at trying to tear down and really disregarding the well-structured barriers, cemented, that had been there for ages between men and women, between certain ethnicities, between religious identities, between socioeconomic categories of people, between those with power and those without power. That Jesus was tearing those things down. And so we say, no, we in Jesus' name, we have to address these things. But the way he did it was not through this kind of mass approach. It was so individual. And so he cared, and it was addressed, so much of his teaching was addressing the inequalities and bringing them out, and even just who he ate with, how he talked to people, who he invited into his circle. You read the book of Luke through that lens, he was constantly disrupting the circles, the barriers. But he did it not in, like, some of it was through his teaching, but a lot of it was how he lived. And we have so many records of individual conversations he had with people. So I think, to come to your question of like, how do we deal with this? I think we take our cues from Jesus as saying, first of all, we deal with it on a person-to-person basis. Our individual conversations with the individual people in our lives matter immensely. Even just to begin to reflect on, how am I treating the people, and how do I respond to people that have apparent more wealth or more power, or seem to be, of a race that's more favored than I? Or vice versa, how do I respond to people who I would look at, maybe because of my cultural background, as maybe racially inferior, or because of their job or their role, or what their family is, or what they look like, or what they wear? Am I playing it? Well, yes, the answer is yes, we are all doing it. How do we begin to, in our individual conversations, in the name of Jesus, say, no, we are actually forming a new kind of community here that is not defined by race and ethnicity, gender, social class, power. So that's the first thing. And I think the second one is saying, okay, well, how do we, if I deal with this individually, the individual people in my life, but then how are we as a community showing the world something different? Just saying, ultimately, our hope is not in politics or in social media platforms, whatever. It is through people, because it is fundamentally a people issue, and people are the ones who are valuable to God, not systems, not methodology, not policy. Not that those things aren't important and helpful, but they're fundamentally about people and about community. And so we as the church, even though we don't say we have political power, we may not have economic might, we may not have like the massive voice. That's not how Jesus transformed the world. It was individually as he brought people together.
Yeah, I think that's really a helpful way to look at it, because it can be extremely overwhelming to think that, we need to go against a massive system, a massive structure with lots of history and lots of power. Whereas Vijay, you mentioned that you pointed back to how Jesus is handling the whole thing, one to one, one life at a time, one conversation at a time. That seems to me much more manageable, right? So the question from that would be, what am I doing about my life today and my conversations with my neighbors today? What sort of tiny next thing to do, so to speak, right? That would move the thing forward, that we can fill that action with compassion towards another individual. Maybe it's really just listening in to what someone has to say about the situation and pay attention to that brokenness. And I think that's our call, the call, of the church, as Christians, as Jesus followers. Yeah, so no easy task, but hey, I think this is the right next step to do.
Yeah. And so I would just turn your attention to Jesus, as you follow him, and say, Lord, who is it? What are these individual conversations? Who are the individuals in my life that you would like me to be loving, paying attention to, listening to their heart and their brokenness, and speaking life and peace and reconciliation to them? Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I encourage you, as always, if anyone else you think in your life could benefit from this dose of hope, by all means, share it. And we'll look forward to continuing on the journey with you.